Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today from no code to low code HTTP request and Power Automate. My name is Tifne Ham, and I'm your moderator today. Just want to let you know that we're having some tech issues right now. So if you don't see the Q&A tab next to the messages tab, just go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we'll move them over to the Q&A and get those answered during the appropriate time. Hope everyone is having a good day, and I will go ahead and lead in with Stacy and Austen.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. All right.
Let's go
into it.
All right. We are Stacy Cope and Austen Brown. We represent a Blackbaud partner called Prenger Solutions Group, the home of Ask Genius and Automate Genius. Please check us out. We're excited to be here with you and share about some fun things you can do in Power Automate. So I'm Stacy. I am located in Omaha, Nebraska. I have been working with Razor's Edge specifically since 2011. And for the past 3 years, I've been learning how to use Power Automate to integrate with Razor's Edge and make the data clean itself and make it do a whole bunch of other awesome stuff. So that's me. Austen, do you want to do an intro?
Sure. So I'm Austen Brown. I am located in central North Carolina. So if you're on the East Coast, we all have the benefit of being in the same time zone as BB Dev Days. I talked to someone in Canada this morning that was up at 7:30 a.m. Amazing. Anyway, tangents. So I've been working with Razor's Edge for 12 years and Power Automate for 3. And we're just super excited today to talk to you guys about HTTP calls and all the things you need to know.
Awesome. So what we're talking about today, as we mentioned, we're heavily involved in Microsoft Power Automate, which is kind of a little thing that you can plug all your applications into and get them to work together. Most of the time, most of us using Power Automate are working with the Razor's Edge RENXT connectors, which have a lot of built-in actions that do things like list all the constituents, and it can find constituents based on a constituent code, and it has all these things from Razor's Edge that we recognize, and it's very no code. We can kind of recognize it, read it in English, and it's all Razor's Edgy things that we know, right? And we can do that. What we want to talk to you today is about the Blackbaud Sky add-ins connector, which you can use to send an HTTP request, which has even more options and more things that you can do, but it's a little bit more on the low code side. So you're going to learn a little bit of code adjacent things today so that we can do even more in Power Automate with Razor's Edge and with all the other applications in the Sky universe.
Our examples today will be for Razor's Edge because that's what we know best, but you can use an HTTP call for any of the APIs available through Sky API via Blackbaud. So that's exciting. We just wanted to present you with a bunch of information so you can speak this language too. Everything we know of, we've gone out and researched or typed into AI or just tried to figure this out ourselves so that we could speak the language to ask the questions to get the answers we need, right? So a bunch of these slides are just set up so you could take screenshots or just copy the information so you can have it handy. So in short, an HTTP call very simply is the mechanism that can send and retrieve data from one application to another. HTTP methods are wildly important. So take a screenshot of those. You'll need them later on. Some are very straightforward. Delete equals delete. Others are not. So post equals create, right? So unless you live in a tech coding world, you might not know that on day one. I know that I was very confused day one trying to set up my first call, if that makes sense. So next one.
All right.
So now we're gonna talk through the anatomy of a request URL. So these are the pieces that the greater world will talk about URLs as, and then what Blackbaud references. So the first part is the base URL. So this contains the protocol domain name and the version number. The second bit is the actual endpoint of the API that you're referencing. So the field in Razor's Edge. So this one is looking up phones on a constituent record. The last section is the query parameters. So these are optional, but there are additional filters and sorting mechanisms that you can use in an HTTP call to sort of narrow down what you're asking the system for. So instead of getting all phones in the database, you could include a query parameter for last modified and get all the phones that were changed in the last 24 hours. And the final piece is the orange line represents Blackbaud's relative path. So this will come into play when we go create an HTTP call within Power Automate. This is what the connector with Sky add-ins will need in order to proceed. Finally, there's some things you're going to get back after you do a call. You're going to get a response body, and this is either going to be returned in JSON or an XML format. The folks at Blackbaud have their stuff coming through, I think for the most part, as JSON. And you'll need to put an extra step into the flow to parse this information. So basically to tell the robot how to read the return so that you can use that data elsewhere within your workflow. The last thing that's returned is a response code, and this clues you in as to whether your call was successful or not. So there's a lot of different numbers that fall into the begins with 2, 4, 5, but for the most part, this is what you need to know. Numbers that start with 2 are successful. You're going to see a lot of 200s. That means your flow worked successfully, or I guess your call worked successfully. If you see a number that starts with a 4 or 5, there's some sort of failure involved. The good news is the documentation from Blackbaud for APIs includes information on possible failure codes and what that means for your call. So we're gonna do some live demo. Fingers crossed this works as we practiced yesterday. And we're gonna take a live look at an actual API documentation page from Blackbaud, how you can read through it, what you need to pay attention to. And then we're gonna do a live demo of showing you how to add this into an existing flow within your own Power Automate if you would like.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will jump in here. So as Austen and I mentioned, we are Razor's Edge people by trade and training and have learned Power Automate, but neither of us have programming background. So I want all of you to know that this is something that you are very capable of. If you think that you can't do this, you totally can, because I can do it. So so what I usually do when I'm starting to use these things, I go to developer.blackbaud.com. This is the Blackbaud developer site. You want to get familiar with this and hang out here. There's a lot of really, really great helpful things on these in this site. So remember that. The first thing I do when I come here is go to this little Sky API card, and then there's one that's called API reference. So we talked earlier about the Sky API universe, and this is it right here. These are the applications that you can access with the Sky API method that we're talking about today inside of Power Automate. So this stuff is all the things you can do. Again, Razor's Edge is where we live, so we're going to show you that today, but if you're using any of these other products, check it out. Okay, so we want to do a phones cleanup is what we're going to show you how to do today, and phones exist on constituent records, so we're going to go to the constituent API, and we're going to go to the endpoint reference. So there's a lot of text on these pages, and I want all of you that are not programmers to take a deep breath and focus on the information that you need on these pages. Don't try to understand every single word and character on these pages, because you don't need to. You need to look for the things that you need and Yeah, take lots of deep breaths. So we know we want to do something with email. So we'll probably search for email here in the search box. And this is one of the cool things that you can do with these HTTP requests that you cannot do with the standard connectors. And this is the one that we're going to do. Email address list all constituents. Now, the reason this is cool is because if you are trying to edit all of the email addresses added yesterday in Razor's Edge, you can't do that directly in Razor's Edge, right? You can't say, just show me all of the email addresses that were added yesterday. You can say, show me the constituents that were modified yesterday, and then you can go look at their email addresses, but you can't go directly to emails. So there are some endpoints in here that will list all of the email addresses in your Razor's Edge, which is super cool, right? So this way we can get directly to just emails. So again, do not worry about knowing everything on this page. We're going to actually skip this whole introduction. It's interesting and useful and important information, but what we really want to look at is this request right here. So this is a GET request. So this is the method. So this is going to get us information. Here is the request URL. And as Austen showed us before, we have the base URL here. And then we have the endpoint here, and then we have the query parameters here. And as she mentioned, we need the relative path for the Sky API. Oh yeah, should I make this bigger? It did shrink again. All right, to the Sky API action in Power Automate, we're gonna need this relative path, so I'm gonna copy that. So after the request URL, it shows us the request parameters. So these are the things that we can use to filter in our request. So we can find emails by the date added. And the description over here explains how it works, right? This says, looks for email addresses created on or after the specified date. You can do last modified. You can tell it if you want to include an active, etc. Or you can do it by constituent ID. So you could just get email addresses for one constituent. So these are your kind of options here, and there's descriptions. Other things on this page, the 200 response means that everything succeeded, and it shows you the data that is returned, and there's a sample of the actual, the data that comes in. Again, for those of us who are not programmers, this looks like crazy gobbledygook, but if you read it, it is in English, and this looks like just a regular email address record in Razor's Edge, right? Everything between these two curly brackets are all of the parts of an email address, right? ID we don't usually see, but this is obviously the address. The date added is here, the date modified, whether or not it's do not email, inactive primary, and the type, right? So this is all intelligible. It just doesn't look like, it's not in the format we're used to looking at it, right? So that's a 200 request. And we are going to come back to this later to get this set of sample data. 400 requests here, bad request. This says returns when the specified request parameters are not in the appropriate format. And that really means something like you're telling it to put an email type that you don't have, right? You're saying make the type be e-mail when in your table it's email with no dash, right? So that's what you're going to get if you have a bad request. 403 forbidden is if the user doesn't have permission to see the things. And then down below, there's a kind of detailed description of each field that's returned in the data that you get back. So descriptions, data types, all of that.
One important thing to mention here is the constituent ID common confusion point. It is not the lookup ID you see in the database, which we would call a constituent ID as a normal DBA. It is the system ID. So any IDs returned through the API are the system IDs. And if you need to find them on a constituent record, you need to go to properties. Or if you're looking at it in WebView, it's included in the URL at the top of your screen if you're looking at a constituent record. So just wanted to point that out. That's a common point of confusion, but something you should get down right now. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Austen. All right, let's jump into Power Automate. So we have built this flow already, and we're just going to put a few things in here, a few little things in here to show you how to do the HTTP call action. So to explain what this flow is, we have in our database, and I know you all have a lot of things like this too. If we have an email address get checked do not contact, we want that email address to have an email type of unsubscribed. That will keep it out of all of our queries for our email lists and out of all of our things, right? So the reason we want to automate this is obviously, all of our data entry people forget to change it, right? They just check do not contact, or gift officers forget to change it when they find out somebody doesn't want to be contacted as an email. Or if somebody opts out through an email, the system doesn't know to change the type, but we need the type changed for all of our processes to work, right? I know you all have things like that. So the way this flow works, we're just going to manually trigger it. It's going to start by getting the past time, which is 24 hours ago, so that we can do a last modified 24 hours ago and just check the most recently updated ones. This is an email type variable. Whenever we're using something more than once in a flow, we tend to like to use a variable so we can just plug it in. So we're going to call this variable email type, and it is unsubscribed. So this is the actual table entry of our email type that we want to change things to. Okay, so we're going to start by adding our Sky add-ins HTTP request action. So it's right here. And let's plug that in. And as we learned from our API documentation, this method is a get. And I already copied that relative path, so I will paste it here. We have to click to show our advanced parameters. And again, as Austen showed you the anatomy of an HTTP request, typically you would use this whole URL if you were working in some sort of other programming language. But for the way this works, there's a little bit more, it's a little bit more plug and play and a little bit more user-friendly. So we do want to do last modified, and I'm going to copy this because we need to get this field exactly right. So our query parameter is going to go right here. We're going to do last modified, and we want to use that past time. So we're going to do last modified on or after the past time, and we're going to get all those email addresses.
I'm just going to add really quick that in Power Automate, when you use a time thing, right, it's going to default to UTC now, which is the universal time. It's like 5 or 6 hours ahead of US-based time. So if you want it to be within your current time zone, there's an action you can add called convert time zone, and you could plug in the output from past time in there and convert it. The other thing is that it defaults to this really long time thing that's like year, month, day, hour, minute, second, but that's okay for this because that's the format that the date time needs to be in for the API to use it, right? So we're not going to change the output of the past time in any way. But I just wanted to mention that it might show up as a super long thing, but that's okay for this.
Yep. So so that's really all we need to do. We put our relative path in and we put our query parameters in, and so that is ready to go. Now, this is going to return us a bunch of JSON like we saw in the documentation. So we're going to go there and we're going to find that and copy it because we need to tell Power Automate what the heck it's looking at when it gets this stuff back. So we're going to parse JSON here. And the content to create from is the return from our send an HTTP request. And we're going to use our sample payload to generate the schema. So we'll copy and paste that right there and say done. And then it's going to turn it into computery language to tell it what this thing is that it gets back and explain it and what everything needs to be called. So now you will see if we, well, I'll just show you here. So we have a, so next, so basically to explain what this flow is doing, we're going to get all of our emails modified yesterday here. We're going to tell the computer what all that stuff means, and then we're going to do a condition. So we're going to check that the type and the do not email status is what we want, right? So if the type is not equal to unsubscribed, which was in our variable, and if do not email is equal to true, we're going to change it. Otherwise, we're going to ignore it, right? So we're going to use our dynamic content, and now we have outputs from our parse JSON here. So we need to find the type, and there it is under the parse JSON body type. So that's it. So now if type is not equal to unsubscribed, and we're going to go back to dynamic content, do not email, body do not email is equal to true. So if something is marked do not email and it has a type other than unsubscribed, basically that's how we know what we want to do with it. So we'll close that. All right, and then we're going to update a constituent email address. And this right here is the ID, the system record ID of the email address. So if we, that's coming from our parse JSON also. It's just remembering it from yesterday when we did this. So I'm going to click save on this, and I'm going to show you our constituent record. So Roy Kent's record was updated yesterday, and he has an email type of email, and it is marked do not contact because somebody talked to him yesterday and found out he didn't want this, right? So we want to change this to unsubscribed. So we'll go run our flow. We'll click test, click a lot of buttons to get it to test. Keep clicking. All right, we'll give that a second. And it is finding things. It's found our emails modified yesterday and parsed it. And it did nothing. What just happened, Austen?
Yeah, I think you have to replace the one it found. The piece it, like the ID. Yeah,
the ID.
It's remembered what we did yesterday, but not what you did now.
That's funny. All right, let's try this. All right. It worked perfectly when we did it yesterday, everyone. Try it again. Oh, my condition is failing. There are no items. Oh, it didn't. It thinks that we didn't update any records.
Run it off of the previous run we did yesterday.
I don't know how to do that. I've never done that.
Okay, go to edit test, and then instead of manual, click automatically with a recently used, and use the one from 20 hours ago.
That's cool. I didn't know you could do that. Learn something new every day, everybody. All right, that ran successfully, but it's still not finding anything. This is too funny.
Gosh. And
okay, so Kavya has a good question. Did you need to add authentication headers to the HTTP request from Automate? No, you do not. And that's what's cool about this HTTP request action in the Sky API. We don't have to add authentication because that's in that connector. Okay, so it's not finding our modified email.
Increase the pass time to 36 hours.
All right.
Y'all,
we'll try this one more time and then we'll move on with our lives and go to questions.
I swear it worked yesterday.
But you all do get the idea, right? Even if we can't get it to actually change this record. Let me try this last thing, and if it doesn't do it, we'll just move on. Oh, it did it. All right. I changed this yesterday at 3 o'clock, which was less than 24 hours ago, for the record. Okay. So I'm refreshing Roy Kent's record, and it's giving me.
And you're, oh, it opened the side thing. Ah, yay!
And ta-da! And it has changed his type to unsubscribed. So this is, let's go back, Austen, to our PowerPoint and wrap up our thoughts here really quickly. And then we'll
answer all the questions as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Okay. So we do have a handful of favorite HTTP calls that are not in the standard connectors. but are in the Sky API and can be used in this way. So the list all things that we just showed you, like the phones, addresses, constituent codes, all the stuff. Delete exists in the APIs, and they're not in the standard connectors, which I think is very smart. I think that deleting is terrifying. So be obviously super, super careful. But if you have something like a custom field that you're using for something temporarily and you just want to delete them all, or after a certain length of time you want to delete them, or if you have aliases that are not being used, you can delete them. So using the APIs to delete things can save you a bunch of time. Austen, do you want to run through a couple of these?
Yeah, so this is the third one is one I found in the APIs this week. So you can get all of the event participation information for a single constituent. So that's now one of my favorites. Getting pledge installment and payments info would enable you to potentially do a pledge reminder flow. APIs for memberships were mentioned this morning. Another cool one I found was data integration. So you can control code tables, create attributes, all sorts of fun things directly from the API. And then webhooks are super cool. We're not going to get into those today because those are very firmly in the intermediate advanced category. But you can trigger a workflow based off of an event in the database. So say you want an immediate notification when someone gives a gift of $5,000 or more, and you want that to show up in a Teams channel, webhooks are how you do that.
All right, some quick resources for you. If you need kind of written out how to do this, check out this community post by Ben Regier. We love this. This is how I've learned how to do these HTTP requests. So very grateful to him for writing this out in a really clear way.
And then ask all your questions on the Power Platform forum. There's a great cohort of people there answering questions and helping folks find solutions, and that's the best place to go.
Yep.
All right, let's do this. How quickly can we go through questions?
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can put this. Actually, I might not because I can't find it. Okay, there it is. I can put this in front of me. Okay, so Akash has a question. How does it know to query your database? So that connector, the Sky add-ins connector that has that action for HTTP requests is different from the standard HTTP request action that comes with Power Automate, and this one has the authentication built into it and knows that you're tied to your database, so that it's connected through that action. So so that's very cool. That's why you can get away with no authentication headers and all of that, because it's part of that action.
Aaron has a question. Is that to say that you could use the API call to get event participants to automatically generate on a constituent profile? Yeah, so you could do an HTTP call to get that information to display it pretty much anywhere you want. You could do a digest, you could build out a constituent profile and it goes on there. To me, it's just a great summary tool you could use.
Karen, yes, you can use this in a Razor's Edge test database environment. As far as I know, you would have to go through and connect it in the marketplace to that environment, but I would think that you could. Tanya's asking
if we like the new designer and that he's still using the old one. I will say that the new designer has a few bugs in it. So I would start out using the new designer, and then if you run into something that you're having a weird error or something's not running like you would anticipate it to, switch to the old designer. I know that Microsoft is actively trying to update the new designer with new things, the things that people are complaining about on the surveys. So start with the new, end up in the old. Truth be told, I end up in the old one a lot.
Yep, same.
Hi, we have about 30 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get our survey out, if that's okay.
Yep.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. We really appreciate you and being interactive. I'm about to launch a survey, so if everyone could fill this out, this is wonderful. It's critical for receiving feedback for our Golden Ticket Awards, because the 3 highest rated sessions receive ticket to present at BBCon. And we know Stacy and Austen have absolutely earned that. So please fill out your surveys. We appreciate you. We thank you for coming, and the recording will be available. I love the golden ticket. Okay.
If we didn't get to your question, we'll try to get in touch with people to get your email and respond that way.
Yep, send us messages. And our emails are Stacy@PrengerSolutions.com and Austen@PrengerSolutions.com. So you can write straight to us too. Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.